Welcome to the Free Birth Podcast, a supportive space for people who are learning, exploring, and celebrating their autonomous choices in childbirth. Together, we'll unpack truths, share personal stories, and claim our ability to birth freely and intuitively. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
Exciting news, listeners. The Free Birth Society apparel store has opened. Head on over to freebirthsociety.com and check out the adorable onesies and toddler shirts, adult tank tops, hoodies, and more, all celebrating messages of free birth. Again, that's www.freebirthsociety.com. I'm excited to be releasing a two-part episode with my new dear friend Katya, who just recently had her free birth in the Dominican Republic about a month ago. Part 1 dives into the depressing birth culture of Dominican Republic and Katya's pretty wild first birth, where she had to spend the majority of her labor driving 6 hours to reach home and had a traditional birth attendant waiting for her. Katya also shares her list of fearful possibilities that she had to come to terms with in order to free birth her second baby. Why don't we start with wherever you think that your journey begins?
Well, Emily, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for being such a bright light, for being a badass goddess, a feisty priestess. Your podcast has been so amazing, and I didn't know about it until very Lacey, our mutual friend. Lacey and I did a yoga teacher training in India together several years ago, and we kept in touch, and I just love her so much.
Where in India?
In Rishikesh in the north.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience, and she's such a special soul. But, when I learned that she was planning a free birth, I have to be honest, my reaction was like, oh wow, really? Oh, it was like a sharp inhale. And I really had to sit with that for a while, but we can chat about that a little bit later in the story. But
isn't it crazy how quick you can like turn around too? Because that was a pretty quick, I mean, her baby's only like, what, 7-8 months old or something.
Fox, beautiful fox. Yeah. But Lacey was the reason I discovered your podcast, and I binged on every episode.
That's awesome. And how long have you been in the Dominican Republic?
Rob and I have lived here for 6 years. We came here from Canada, and we're wedding photographers here. So we have a pretty neat life. We used to live on the north side of the island in a beautiful town called Cabarete. It's a windsurfing capital of the Caribbean. And when I first got pregnant with Zion, so he's 2.5 now, so we can count backwards to however long ago that was. I knew 100% that I didn't want to be in the hospital. That's just not even something that crossed my mind even for a second. But Rob and I started thinking of different options, and I heard through the grapevine that there was a Canadian midwife living somewhere close by. And you know how it is, especially with a small town, you kind of ask around, and finally I got a hold of this woman, and the only time I cried in my pregnancy was when she said yes to taking me on as a client. So she's a super lovely woman who has a beautiful story. She's fairly young, but Zion was her 2008 birth.
Whoa.
Yeah. She used to run a birthing hospital in Afghanistan and in Haiti and other places. Just incredible woman. So Rob and I felt super lucky. So we did all the prenatals with her, and she was just super, free and, treated us beautifully.
And how does the licensing or legalities of, just quickly, of midwifery work in Dominican Republic? Like, was she licensed?
No.
Okay.
So she would be basically just as a traditional birth attendant.
Gotcha.
And maybe I should spend a couple of minutes sharing what the birth culture, or the lack thereof,
definitely,
in Dominican Republic. Up until, I believe, last year, Brazil was the number one, I think, country for the highest number of cesarean births. Well, now Dominican Republic is at number one.
Damn.
So I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but well over 85% of births end up with cesarean, with surgery. And the breastfeeding rate is under 5%.
Nobody does it.
Whew.
Wow.
I just need to take a breath, because my blood boils every time this comes up in conversation. Or
it's disappeared from so many countries and so many cultures.
Yeah. So, this is the place where we are.
And you knew that when you got pregnant on the island?
I did, yeah. I'm part of a yoga community here, and I've also been leading women's moon circles, so very much part of community, and of course hearing stories. So going to the hospital was just not an option for us. However, Rob and I did go. You're excited, you're not sure what to expect. So we went for a blood test to the local hospital, and had a quick meeting with their main OB. And I won't go too much into the story because that one really makes my blood boil. I still imagine punching this doctor in the face.
No.
But we sat down, and he's like, your blood work looks good. Everything looks good. He would not make eye contact with me at all. He just looked at Rob the entire time.
Oh, nice. Love that. Love that.
And at that time, I think I was maybe 8 or 9 weeks only, and didn't do very much research. I didn't know what questions to ask. But one of the questions we asked was about their episiotomy rate. And he's like, oh, well, that's just has to be done. He even chuckled a little bit, like, why would you even ask?
Yeah, you stupid girl.
Every woman.
Why are you even talking? Is probably what he was thinking.
Yes, but it's like, oh, girl, your vagina's not. No, you need me to cut you open to get that baby out. Anyway, I left the meeting just shaking, and I was like, we're not coming back. Luckily, we didn't have to. But the kind of stories you hear of what goes on in hospitals here is just atrocious. There is so much obstetrical violence happening here, and there are no midwives. There are no doulas. Only in the last couple of years, we're seeing, some doulas in the expat community, or some interest in the hospitals in the capital in Santo Domingo, but very, very little. Anyway, we felt super, super lucky to have this midwife. And what I want to say about the experience of having her is, well, I just, again, got super, super lucky. But from where I am now, having given birth, having had a free birth, looking back, I'm amazed at how much control I surrendered just by feeling safe, because I had a midwife. And she was a lovely lady, but I didn't know how the birth was going to go. And I didn't really know what to ask during our prenatal visits.
Sure.
I didn't know, past palpating the belly and talking about my fears, what else should I be asking, really? And so it's, reflecting back, that's what's really interesting to me now, is surrendering so much control, just trusting, like, oh, well, she's going to be there, so she'll take care of whatever happens. So I didn't really have to think about, well, what do we do if she's not there? That thought crossed my mind. What happens if if something happens and she's not around. Or
you guys didn't talk about anything like that?
No, isn't that so strange?
Yeah, that's a trip.
It's such a trip.
Did you talk about what would happen in quote unquote emergency situations if she was there?
Not really.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah.
Well, in some way, I kind of like it because it's like, it's kind of,
so much.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that it wasn't super heady.
We did have a plan B, which I tried not to think about, but there was a hospital close by, and anyway, but it is completely wild to me that not once did we have the conversation of, well, hey, what happens if you guys are 6 hours away and you go into labor and you're in the car in active labor for 6 hours before you get to me? That was a little bit of foreshadowing because that's what happened to me. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I did not expect to go into labor at 37 weeks.
Mm.
We're wedding photographers, and super ironic, our last wedding of the season was June 20th. After that, we were supposed to go home, and I was supposed to meditate and walk on the beach and journal and prepare for my birth.
Oh, no.
Well, June 20th ended up being Zion's birthday.
Oh, my gosh.
So we lived in Cabarete, which is this wonderful little town where the midwife lives as well. And our work took us all the way to Punta Cana, which is where all the weddings take place. And I went into labor the night before our last wedding. I was doing some emails and my water started releasing. So I was like basically 36 and 6.
Wow.
And it was 11 o'clock at night. Rob was already in bed because we wanted to be fresh for the wedding the next day. And I was like, oh shit, am I peeing myself or what is this? So I remember I put a towel between my legs and I started Googling what is the...
What's happening to me?
What is the normal, is 37 weeks too early?
Mm.
That's what I was Googling. I didn't want to wake up Rob yet because I was so in denial that anything could be happening. So my water was leaking slowly. I woke Rob up. We called the midwife. This was about midnight. And, she said, open a bottle of wine, drink a glass of wine, and drink a ton of water and go back to sleep or try to sleep and see what happens in the morning.
Sound advice.
Yeah. Well, and I spent some months being, upset with her for not telling me to get the hell in the car and start driving.
Oh, wait, because I'm sorry. I think I missed that. So you were not home.
That's right. We were 6 hours away across the island.
Gotcha. Okay.
Getting
yes.
ready,
then maybe not sound advice. She knew you weren't home.
She knew that. Yeah. And so
that's a lot to bank on.
Wow. So I really wish that we would have gotten in the car and started driving, but I was just so worried that my bride was going to be mad at me.
Sure.
And that's what really drove me to be so much in denial of what was happening because I just so afraid that my bride is, you don't want to disappoint a bride ever. Yeah, so I downloaded the contraction app on my phone and had a glass of wine, drank a bunch of water. We turned off the lights. And so, of course, I didn't sleep at all.
Yeah.
And I started having surges, contractions, about 10 minutes apart. And by the time it was 6 a.m. and the birds started chirping outside, I knew that this was not false labor.
Oh,
and
my God.
I am not shooting a friggin' wedding today. So I woke Rob up and I said, babe, we got to go. Things are really happening. And
can't deny it.
But I was still in denial because can you imagine? You realize that you're totally in labor weeks before you thought you would be. And you have a 6-hour drive across an island.
And this is a
road.
side detail, but What did you do with her wedding? Did you have a backup photographer?
Oh, yes. Yes, yes. For everyone listening, don't worry. The bride got taken care of beautifully. She got a wedding book and, lots of
Okay,
love.
so you're like, we got to go.
So we piled into the car, and another little fun twist. Our computer was stolen from the car, which like never happens. We're in a super safe neighborhood, but the window got busted behind the driver's seat. So the entire 6 hours or whatever it was, we taped it up with a garbage bag, and it was like,
that just happened to me in San Francisco a couple of months ago. I know exactly what you're talking about, and you're in labor. So how was that drive for you? Was it super aggro, or were you just like,
oh my gosh, it was awful. It was awful. And I just kept thinking, how ironic. All I wanted was to be out of the hospital so that nobody confines me to a bed. Nobody straps me down.
You're in a seatbelt.
And here I am, reclining, strapped in by a seatbelt, holding on for dear life. And so I had my earphones in listening to hypnobirthing meditations, and Rob was listening to, I think, metal or something, just hard knuckling it, trying to.
Yeah, poor guy.
as fast as he can. And the hypnobirthing meditations didn't really work, but I'm sure they did their job to some degree, because I was focusing on my breath. And it's really unfortunate because I couldn't let go. I couldn't really get into it. And all I was dreaming of being on all fours and just being all primal and finding my groove, finding my space. So I really felt cheated out of that, and also cheated out of connecting with Rob, because he was completely
chauffeur,
not same wavelength with me at all.
And also, let me just throw in there for anyone listening, if this ever happens to them, or even just a drive at all, and you want to be in all fours, get into the back seat and hang over the edge, or use that back seat for the all fours, because that could be a little hack. It's still not great, but at least you're not like doing that reclining.
For sure. That's such great advice. I did not think of that.
Totally.
But I think partly too, I just wanted to press pause. I just was like, wait, this is so not how it's supposed to go.
Oh my God.
I'm not in labor. No, I'm not in labor.
Crazy.
So luckily our midwife was on the way to our house. She was about 20 minutes away from our house, and we picked her up on the highway, and she got in the back seat, and I just started crying, and because she was there, and I was like, okay, this can happen now. Again, I totally did not think of what would happen if it was just Rob and I. And I felt like I needed the midwife to be there, which I was upset at myself after that I hadn't prepared for another way for things to go. Anyway, she said, by the sounds that you're making, I bet you're around 6 centimeters or so. So by the time we got home, I guess I was about 6 centimeters or something like that. And it was brutal because it was 2:00 in the afternoon, bright sun. I did not have the environment that I wanted at all. I really wanted a cave, and it was like super bright. Nothing was ready. Rob started running around trying to get towels together. There was no time to fill up the pool. And it was too hot, too cold, and I really wanted to pull on something. I just had this animalistic desire to pull on something, and I would look around the room. Okay, I can't pull on the curtains because bring those down.
What can I pull on?
Oh man! And then my midwife's neck she just wanted to sit in a corner and with her notepad anyway. And so I was pulling on the side on the edge of the sheets, and just nothing was working. And I just couldn't get on top of the waves. Yeah. I had them crashing down on me. And I think because I spent so much time strapped in by a seatbelt, I hadn't found any rituals that
Totally.
maybe would work for me. I just felt like a caged animal, honestly.
Yeah, you got like thrown into it.
Yeah. And so it took about 4 hours to meet our boy, and I didn't tear. He came, he was born in the bedroom where he was conceived.
Did you ever feel like you got on top of it, or was it just?
Not really. But I think I do want to share a little bit about the pushing stage. There was a moment when things shifted and I became really lucid. And my midwife said, I think we're getting really close to meeting this baby. Reach down and feel for him. So I felt for him, and here comes
the littlest
munchkin.
Hi, Phoenix.
Hello, buddy.
Oh, you want a booby?
Sorry, love.
Okay.
Let's plug him in. Okay. All right, there we go. We're good. I reached down to feel for his head, and that was such an amazing feeling. But I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. And I remember falling on the bed, and I just said to the midwife and to Rob, please just leave me alone. I just want to break. I just want to sleep. And they both laughed like, come on, are you kidding me?
I'm sure you do.
Honestly, I just wanted a break. And my midwife said, no, you are pushing this baby out. You really need to do this work. And now that I've listened to some brilliant lectures on a few podcasts, I know that is an amazing window, a sacred, beautiful window of time when labor can shift dramatically and a woman could potentially actually nap for a few minutes.
Oh, not just a few minutes. I've seen women sleep for an hour.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And that's really important work that the baby does as well.
Totally.
Right?
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I wonder what your midwife's thought was. Like, what's the danger of saying, maybe she was just trying to give you like a pep talk, like, no, we're right here. Let's do it. But yeah, maybe you absolutely could have slept.
I don't know, because she was really hands off the entire time. But that's the time where she did not let me rest. And I really wish that she would have. And now I wonder, maybe that's a time that Zion needed to turn, to shift. I don't know. So with Zion, Rob encapsulated the placenta. He dehydrated it actually himself, which was pretty cool. And I loved it. I feel like it really helped a lot. We kept the placenta with the baby for about 5 hours or something like that. And it was a really gentle transition. What I wasn't prepared for was the afterbirth pains. That's another thing that I feel nobody talks about. Mm-hmm. And as I held Zion in my arms, I thought that it would be just this explosive oxytocin moment of us falling in love and unicorns and rainbows. And it was not like that. The contractions kept coming, and it was pretty uncomfortable. I didn't realize that. So
how long did they last?
I would say pretty strongly for maybe 45 minutes or so, and then for a couple days. Mm-hmm. And it was worse the second time. Yeah. The second round. Mm-hmm. But just for any expectant mamas, especially first-time mamas, just be okay if that doesn't happen. You'll fall in love with your baby, but don't put a lot of expectations on that first moment.
So did you feel pretty distracted by the pain?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But overall, it was amazing. I got to stay in my bed actually I didn't leave the bedroom for like 10 days.
Nice.
So Rob just kept bringing me delicious food, and it was it was wonderful in that way. But because the baby came so early, I still had a lot of work to do. And so it was, it was pretty crazy. I had newborn, placenta still attached. And with my free hand, I was like typing emails and editing photos for a deadline.
What? Placenta attached? That's hardcore.
Pretty
oh
wild.
My gosh.
But...
Well, and it, it does bring up kind of the larger conversation around early and late and all of these terms. It's like, really, he came on time, and our concept of on time needs to expand and grow and change. And
absolutely,
like, I think, okay, sure, if the baby comes at 32 weeks, you can call it early. But at some point, it's like babies just come in the window of 36 to 44. They just do, and I think it's a very possibly, too tall of an order to just say you should just be completely ready by 35 weeks. But really, you should just be completely ready by 35 weeks, 36 weeks, because then we can, I think if we feel more ready for the reality of how wide the spectrum is, we could prepare our lives around it and welcome it a little more. But like I think your situation's such a good example of you have work, and you're going to work until you don't think you can anymore. But unfortunately, that put you in a position that started off the labor pretty stressful and far away from your nest and really affected the whole labor, unfortunately. But, he didn't come early.
He came, exactly.
He really didn't. What does that even mean, he came early? He just came before you thought he would come.
Absolutely.
And I'm not trying to pick on you. I just think it's such an interesting, because so many women fall to this, and it's such an interesting, way of framing it that we have to move past, so what if,
amen, sister,
what if you were ready and felt like the baby could come any moment from 36 weeks on, which is true. And so how could that have felt different? And, for anyone listening, I just encourage you to learn from us, in this way, because this is not an uncommon story that babies come, quote unquote, early and the parents feel really unprepared, and it's stressful. It starts off the whole thing, I think emotionally quite taxing. So I think we need a big reframe. But I feel you. That's crazy. It's crazy for it to happen before you're ready.
Yeah, and especially with the first birth.
Totally.
Everyone says that, women usually go over their estimated due date, whatever that means, which is a whole other can of worms. But you can imagine when I became pregnant with our second, anyone who asked me when my due date was, I just wanted to hiss at them.
You're like, you don't know anything.
You don't know anything. Yeah. And so ironic because Phoenix was born a couple of days after his due date. And we were expecting him weeks before he came.
Of course. That's how it happens. I know all of this is
learning there.
Yeah, exactly. It's just managing expectations and release, repeat. It's all that is the journey of I think the parent,
Absolutely.
So take me to Phoenix's birth and anything beforehand. At what point did you start to align with knowing you would do this with just you and Rob?
It was a beautiful journey. And I have to thank Lacey, one of your guests on this podcast, for that, and my dear friend, because when she shared that they were going to do it solo, Rob and I really had to watch our own reaction. And we were worried. Of course, I didn't share that with her. And Lacey, if you're listening, I love you. We thought that it was a little bit nuts, especially because it was their first birth. So when we realized we were pregnant, of course, we got in touch with our midwife to see if she would support us again. And she was going to be in Canada at the time. So I was just kind of in denial about what my options would be. it was still early in the pregnancy, and I thought, you know what, we're going to figure it out. Not sure how, not sure what we're going to do. And we learned of Lacey and Flynn's plan. So that was just lingering in the back of my mind. I prepared very differently for this birth than for Zion's. With our first boy, I read so many books. I read everything I could get my hands on. Ina May, of course, and many others. I don't think podcasts were a thing at the time, and if they were, I hadn't discovered them. But with Zion, with Phoenix, I really wanted something different. I didn't want to worry myself. In fact, I didn't want to read any books. I just wanted to tune in and trust myself. I made a beautiful birth altar in our bedroom, and I wanted to connect with this baby in a way that I didn't have a chance with the first, because I thought I would do that after all our weddings were done. So I spent a lot of time praying and meditating. And maybe to some people that would sound too woo-woo, too hippie. But really, there's nothing hippie about connecting with your child. And in the Western world, we are conditioned so much to trust the world that is seen and not tune into the unseen world. So to connect with our baby, we want to hear the heartbeat through, a Doppler, or see a scan and see the baby's face or whatever, and connect with the baby this way. When in fact, I feel personally the best thing that you can do is place your hands on your belly and breathe, and do that every damn day.
Yeah.
To truly connect. And it's just started feeling right as time went on.
Any tips, sorry to interrupt, any tips like of anything specific? I'm trying to think of anyone who's hearing this that's like, okay, but like, what do I do? Like, how do I actually do that? What does that look like?
Well, that's a good question. Well, place your hands on your belly and breathe and see what happens. Or journal, or take a walk and listen to music, or dance. There's really no one way to do it, but the common denominator here is to trust. And are you going to live in trust, or are you going to live in fear? Are you going to breathe into trust or into doubting or fear? And there's just, it's a journey from fear to trust. You have to get through all your fears to get to trust. But it's not some sort of an abstract idea. We either trust in our bodies or we don't. And you have to sit there and do the work. It's not enough to just talk and think about your fears in the prenatal visits. Right. Whoever your provider is, or whoever your support network is, whether it's a girlfriend or a mom or a doula or a midwife, you have to do the work yourself. No one's going to do it for you. And a key event also was I received a message from my midwife, and she said, I have a feeling that you guys want to do it solo. It is okay for you not to invite me. I will not be, upset, or I don't remember exactly how she worded it, but
she was off the table, right?
Yes, but we were talking about it, and maybe she thought that we would fly her in from Canada, or
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Okay.
But I just remember reading that message, and feeling like every cell in my body is vibrating with a hell yes and a thank you. I'm not sure why I needed the permission, but it really made a difference at that moment to hear her say that. It was reaffirming and beautiful to be like, what, we can do this solo? Actually, yes, we absolutely can do this solo. And when I ran this by Rob, he was on the same page with me immediately.
Well, and you guys pretty much did it solo last time.
That's right. Yeah. But it seems like a radical thought,
I know.
Emily. Now, I mean, being in this community, having heard so many stories, and after I'd shared that we'd had a free birth on social media, on Instagram, I can't believe how many women said, me too, me too.
Right?
Me too.
I know. It's like a little secret society.
I was thinking to myself, where have you women been? I haven't even heard of this term, free birth or unassisted birth. I do want to say I don't like the term unassisted.
Yeah.
Because we are assisted. Even if you're accidentally end up having your baby by yourself in the bathroom, you are assisted. You are assisted by the spirit of every woman, every mother who has done this before you.
Well, and it's also annoying because the whole term, it was a legal term for paperwork if a provider wasn't present. So it's not actually, we're perpetuating it now socially inaccurately. It doesn't matter that it's a legal term or not, really. Of course, we are assisted, and I think it causes a lot of confusion to call free birth unassisted birth, because it implies to people who don't understand it that the woman is alone and that the woman is unsupported and all of this other weird stuff that, of course, some women do choose to be alone, and that's perfectly fine and normal and wonderful, and doesn't mean that they're unsupported either. But I think it confuses a lot of people when people say unassisted, because you're right. There is, like what Sister Morningstar said, you have your millions of years of biology, you have your partner, you have possibly somebody else present, you have your baby, you have yourself. There's so much happening. There's so much assistance.
That's right. Absolutely. I'd love to walk through a brief list of, well, I don't know if it's that brief, a list of my fears, because I think there's this misunderstanding or stigma with free birthers that we don't have fear and we're fearless and irresponsible. So I do want to talk about the fears that I had to face to be okay with my decision. Is that all right?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, exactly. And I echo that all the time, that just because we're free birthing, I think what that says is that you've chosen trust over fear, but that doesn't mean that that fear is not present. Fear is healthy, and it's, can help critical thought and, all of this stuff. It's just that fear is not trumping and dictating the decision. That quote, never make a decision out of fear. It's like such a good quote. And people are so inundated with fear that to not make a decision about birth out of fear seems incredibly radical.
Right. Radical. I love thinking about the word as going back to our roots.
Totally.
When you think of it that way, nothing really radical about it at all.
Nope.
Yeah. So my first fear, as I started journaling about the possibility of free birth, was tearing. And I thought, what am I going to do if there's no midwife to stitch me up? So I started looking into it a little bit more to find out that according to research, if you look at women with first and second degree tears, at 6-week postpartum, there is no difference in how well they heal. And in fact, there's potentially more trauma if you do get stitches. So I had no idea. I thought that was amazing to learn. So if I did tear, I would be okay, that I did not have to go to the hospital to get stitched up, unless, of course, it was something that intuitively I felt needed medical attention.
Yeah, there's a big difference between a first degree, and a slight second degree, and then, a real deep tear into the muscle. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it's confusing to people. Sorry, I just want to say to that, it's confusing to people who birth in the hospital and with some regulated midwives, because they suture first degrees, but you also have to consider that it is a very expensive procedure, and, they're trained to charge, especially if you're at a hospital that's, being charged per procedure versus a package. And they're also dealing with residents and teaching and practicing. And there is huge incentive to suture at any cost in a hospital setting, but that does not therefore equal that the suturing was necessary.
Just wow. Wow is all I have to say to that. Yeah. Doesn't that just make you so mad?
Oh, girl. Yeah. The most awkward is being in the room, being like, you don't need to do that, but, oh, yes, of course it makes me so mad. Just our vaginas are so used and abused and violated and mistreated and disrespected. And there is no room in obstetrics and in this culture for the deep healing capacities of the vagina. And the power and the stretching and all of the stuff that it totally does, that, I don't need to prove to anybody. It just does it. You can just watch it. It does all this beautiful stuff, but then, we wouldn't need the men to save us.
Yeah. Our vaginas are brilliant.
They really are. I mean, just the tissue themselves, the elastic, oh my God, how do I say that word?
Elasticity.
I can't say it. Yeah, thank you. And just the healing properties. It's like biting your cheek, how quickly that heals. It's like basically the same tissue.
We are meant to stretch and we're meant to tear.
Wait, you mean everything won't be ruined? Yeah, and then the husband stitch, and I mean, just so much just derogatory, just painful misogyny, is our vagina is like at the crux of it. It's just so... It's so sad. So anyway, so that's awesome that you found out this truth that was revealed to you.
And so that fear just totally dropped off. And then a side note on that, in my research, I realized that massaging the area also doesn't help, although it's nice for foreplay, but totally not necessary, because our bodies are just meant to do what they do in the moment. We don't need to practice for the marathon.
Yep, exactly. So just to reiterate that. So perineal massage does not improve results. There's no evidence that it does. There's no evidence that it improves anything. So for anyone listening who thinks they need to get their perineal massage in with their partner or by themselves, to stretch, it's like folklore, just like how they used to tell women to rub rough washcloths on their nipples to toughen them up for breastfeeding. No, this is not anything that we need to do. We do not need to prepare in any way beyond perhaps nutrition,
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Well, and the biggest one is, of course, with the baby's first breath. And I think that most people who are questioning this decision will go to that fear, maybe even, well ahead of tearing, because the baby's well-being is, of course, more important than maybe your perineum. And so the question is, what happens if the baby needs suction, for example? And I admit to completely being oblivious to what needs to happen, because in our first birth, I was completely reliant on our midwife. I thought the baby's going to come out, and if the baby needs resuscitation of any kind, I trust that my midwife will know what to do. Mm-hmm. So when planning for a free birth, Rob and I had to very honestly look at that fear and do our research. And what we found out was shocking in the most beautiful way. And I have your podcast to thank for that, and also the Indie Birth podcast, Taking Back Birth, as well as some lectures on the Birthful podcast. And I highly, highly recommend all three. But the baby's first breath in an undisturbed physiological birth is, well, everything in our biology wants the baby to breathe. And the baby does not necessarily take a breath or start crying right away, and that is perfectly normal. Mm-hmm. If you think of it, of everything that needs to take place for the baby to start breathing, the baby's still connected to the umbilical cord. Organs in the body are expanding. So many changes are happening. Give the baby a minute. Just give it a minute. The baby doesn't need to be turned upside down and spanked and suctioned immediately in most cases, in an overwhelming number of cases, because the baby just needs a moment. And it's okay for some babies do come out and they're not as pink as maybe we expect them to be, and that is okay too. There was one.
Yeah, I don't think people understand that the baby's still being provided for through the placenta. Exactly. Until that system is complete. So it understandably, we have this whole culture of nobody knows anything. Nobody knows anything about births and babies and what's normal and physiological birth, and doctors don't know anything about physiological birth, so we've got a whole confusion around what's normal. And so when we're trying to have these normal experiences, it can look pretty freaky when a baby comes out a little on the floppy side. Almost always that baby is going to, get what it needs from the placenta and pink up and come around. And there's a multi-minute transition period that happens. But if you don't know that's normal, like you're saying, that can seem so scary.
Mm-hmm. And the fear only just makes it worse. And as we're waiting for this beautiful brand new baby to take its first breath, we're not breathing either.
Exactly.
We're not helping at all. And I absolutely loved your episode with Sister Morningstar. Mm-hmm. For anyone who hasn't heard that one, please go. That's a 2-part episode. It's just brilliant how she talked about the baby's first breath, and I think the 5 steps that mothers intuitively, instinctively make to help the baby breathe. It's just so beautiful. It made me cry. I think I was like 38 weeks or something at that time. It was so beautiful. Mm-hmm. So that fear we took care of, I felt. The next one, of course, was hemorrhage. And again, in undisturbed birth, free of coaching and interventions, it is extremely rare for a woman to hemorrhage. And so what I knew I wanted to do was, when the baby would be born, I wanted to rub the oxytocin-rich blood on my belly, which I did. I knew that we would nurse, and in the undisturbed, quiet, beautiful cave of my bedroom, I just trusted that we would be okay. But we were ready in case something would happen. I also want to say that it is normal for women to lose more than 2 cups of blood, because we're all made differently, and the fear around losing blood can contribute. Yeah.
Well, and everyone, it's less about the amount of blood, and it's more about how that person responds to the loss of blood, because some women will pass out, and will respond in a postpartum hemorrhage way with a lot less blood, and other women can lose a lot more blood and be fine and recoup. So it's even to put that whole 2 cups thing, on anybody, it's you can't routine this. This is such an individualized, you can't standardize a hemorrhage. It's how women respond to it. So yeah, it is pretty rare. And even when they do happen, I've interviewed some women who have hemorrhaged in a unhindered birth, and they, they recovered, and they passed out and they came back to, or I've only interviewed one woman so far who called 911, after a hemorrhage. But I think the larger thing that we're touching on is this really comes down to a different set of risk assessments, and some women would look at that list of fears and say, or not even fears, list of possibilities, they are list of possibilities, and say, I'm willing to accept, what happens in a hospital to prevent or treat those potentialities immediately. Whereas other people make a different risk assessment to say, I'm going to hedge my bets on trusting what normal physiological birth provides for me and my baby, and I'm not willing to put myself in an abusive environment, to potentially see what's going to happen and see if this is going to work or not, thus hindering the whole process of it working itself anyway. Right.
It was also illuminating to learn that as the uterus contracts post-birth, that process can get hindered if there's a lot of post-birth interventions. So gloved hands, a lot of noise, people taking the baby away or putting a hat on the baby, or just all of that can actually prevent the uterus from contracting properly. And that can contribute to hemorrhage.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And it's so interesting because so many women, will say, even I saw that on your social media, but it happens everywhere, of, oh, I hemorrhaged after my birth in the hospital, so I could never have a home birth. And it's like, well, yeah, but we need to dissect that storyline a little bit, because
what happened there?
Yeah, you might have hemorrhaged because you had an induction and you were on artificial oxytocin for 3 days and your uterus was exhausted, and then your baby got pulled out and blah, 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 blah. Of course you hemorrhaged, and would that happen at home? Extremely unlikely. It's a totally different set of circumstances. But people don't apply the critical eye to it that they need to. Birth is not the same across the board. And the way your birth goes down at a hospital is super different hormonally than it goes down at home. And you will be hormonally more protected at home.
That's right. Yeah. Another question that people had that, well, I was happy to answer was, what about the cord? People are like, well, are you going to clamp it? Like, who's going to cut it? And that's just wasn't even a concern.
Yeah, that's like the smallest thing.
Yeah. But because we see it in movies, right? It's like, clamp, cut the dad cuts the cord.
And it really is this disassociation of like, if there's not a doctor to do that, what would that even look like? It just, I don't even have a reference point for what that would look like, because everything in my conditioning says that it happens this one way. And if we change the environment, I don't even have the creative thought or education or anything to even know what it would be otherwise.
That's right.
Which, of course, you could just boil some scissors or
it's
like so simple.
Yeah. Or burn it or just wait for it to fall off. You know, that's an option too.
Totally.
Yeah. Also, this was a valid question for me. Would I know when to push? And that's what a lot of women would ask as well, because first of all, we're so used to the idea of being coached by someone, by a birth professional. So how will I know what to do? How will I know when to push my baby out? And for me, it was especially important to trust, because I had to trust that this time I would know when to push my baby out. And with Phoenix's birth, it was absolutely brilliant. I got the urge to push, and it was amazing. It was the most amazing thing in the world.
So did Rob share any of these fears as well? How was his process? Was it pretty simple for him, or did he have a lot to work out?
Yeah, he's one amazing dude.
Sounds like it.
He was on board with everything, and he listened to a lot of the podcasts with me,
nice.
which made it easier. And we would have these great discussions, and he would get fired up about a lot of these topics in the same way. So it was great.
Nice.
Yeah. I will say I made a big poster and wrote a bunch of beautiful affirmations to have in our space, and didn't look up at them even once, but they were brilliant for Rob. And he said that at some points throughout my labor, he would glance up at this poster, and it really helped him. In particular, I think he said, I trust my body, I trust my baby, was the most powerful one for him, because he held the space for me so beautifully. But some fears did creep in, and that reminder to trust the process was really powerful for him.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just really lucky to have him. He was great. But I think that sums up maybe the most prominent of fears.
Yeah, and I think the rest of it is just kind of sitting in the unknown. Like, I don't have any fear about my upcoming birth, but yeah, I definitely have some obvious unknowns. Is it going to be okay? Is it going to be safe? These are things that I'm, like we said earlier, hedging the bets that everything will be all good. I don't particularly think I'd be any safer in a hospital. I don't buy into all of that. So I think it kind of what I feel like we're getting to is, after we address all of these, lists of reasonable things that we have to learn about and think on, beyond that, then we're just sitting in the unknown and sitting in the mystery of it. And that is beyond what a lot of people are interested in or willing to do. And then some people are.
Yeah, you got it.
And we're going to leave it there for this week. Tune in next week to hear Katya's incredible free birth story of baby Phoenix, and she will share her valuable list of postpartum advice. Have a great week.